So if I were to give this marker to you, ma'am, and then I say pass this to the back row, the supplier was me. I inputted you. The process was give it to somebody else. The output was again the marker, and the customer was whoever you delivered it to. You can look at any process like this. And so much today we were talking about businesses and my business. What keeps me sane and how I keep all of the businesses actually functioning is basically I have a spreadsheet of, what is all the possible information that would be supplied to me for that business. What do I do with it? Basically, what information could be given to me? What do I do with it? What was generated as an output, or why am I even in business, and why do I even need to be in business? So where I have to convert one to the other, and then who am I delivering that to? And I have that for absolutely everything. Even on my website, when I have an about us, the supplier, contact us. The supplier in that page would be contact us. The input would be the customer's information. The process is that it's emailed to me. The output is that I get that. I make a phone call to somebody and to the person that supplied the information. And you can go through this. There's also something else to realize here, and this goes more to efficiency. Some of these documents say, hey, be efficient. Okay, what does that mean, right? So you have two things here. You have something called cycle time. Write this down. And then touch time. All right, and let's actually do an example. Here you go. I'm going to toss this marker to you. I want you to hand it back, and then I want you to get it back to me. But in this example, it's going to be an email. Instead of a marker, it's an email. You're out on vacation, right? So you're on vacation, a couple weeks go by, you finally come back from vacation, you check your email, and then you reply to the person that sent it to you. So pass it back. There you go. So if you noticed in that, your touch time, how long it took you to touch it, was relatively quick. All you had to do was forward it on. But the whole cycle time was much, much longer than that, right? Because you were on vacation or you weren't available, whatever the case is. So you can grade things in terms of cycle time and touch time. Sometimes it takes me a week to get back to somebody, but I only had to spend 5 minutes on that email. See what I mean? So touch time and cycle time, that slows down the process. So when you look at the things that you do at work, how long is it taking you to touch them, and how long is it taking you for the whole thing to be turned around, and can you shorten that process? What do you have to do? You might, for example, you might even be able to make an email rule in Outlook to say, anytime I receive an email from Leo, automatically forward it to someone else. And then you reduce your touch time to that. You would reduce your touch time by doing that. So like auto replies and templating things, ultimately that helps us be efficient. And again, we got to move mountains, so being efficient in our own lives it's paramount, and then let alone the whole process. So now that you know how to look at this stuff, when you go back to work and you got to move mountains, you can see what time is being wasted and what time is being efficient. Back to this, here we have process inputs and process outputs. It's basically a SIPOC. So when it comes to the input for what your process is, this is the CNA process, you want to identify information types, select the impact level, what do you think that it is, review, finalize, adjust, prove, disprove, those impact levels, assign your security category, cross-reference that with the actual control selection and the minimum levels, and then basically output your documents. On the very highest level, that's what it looks like. And it's nice to have a little process flow diagram. Also, this could have been done in an Excel spreadsheet relatively quickly. Alright. Now this is a very important piece. Roadmaps. Why do you use roadmaps when you're trying to drive somewhere?
Because men don't ask for directions.
Good answer. And don't ask for directions. So you can know where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. This tells you who's involved, the roles. So it's the what are you doing, the activity, and who are you doing it with. And it goes through each of those steps. And I'll just highlight some of these so we get the idea. Input, identify the information systems. This is the meat of the document, so this is the important piece. The input, again, SIPOC there. The agency to develop their own policies regarding information system identification for the categorization process. Who's going to do that? CIO, they're ultimately responsible, and the security official. And any sort of owners of the information may be involved with that. Identify the types of information. Basically, in a meeting with the information owner, you would document the agency and the business missionaries, identify mission-based information, identify management support information, any sub-functions, and things like that. Select the initial provision level. A security officer, you can work with that person on that. Select what you think the impact is. Verify that with what the ISSO thinks that is. Argue it out, arm wrestle, figure it out what it is. And then, now after you get the impact level and the category correct, then you can do this provisionally. And then you go into step 3 here, which is both of those. Verify things like confidentiality, integrity, and availabilities. And you may actually have to do some work and make some phone calls to figure out what that really is. If there's any sort of situation or operational drivers like timing and life cycle, we got to get this done in the next 3 months or whatever it is. Assign the security category to make sure you're matching your apples to apples. And again, that would be the CIO would oversee that from the big picture. And then the mission owners also, or information owners, may be involved. The output of the categorization can be used as the input to the next selection. So one process can feed another process, right? You could have an external agency that request information. You internally do your process, hand it back, and then they do their thing again. So that's just multiple processes feeding each other. But notice that the authorizing officials slash developers may be involved in that, so that's a little bit different. And then each of the steps of this, identify information types. All right, and I'm not going to spend too much more time on this. We got that process down, and that's the piece of it. So if you wanted more on that, you can go through and actually read the actual language and the verbiage and get a better understanding. But just let's do one of those real quick. So step 1, identify information types, FIPS 199. The purpose of the government, basically a service to the citizens. The mechanisms the government uses to achieve its purpose. What are you going to supply? Who's your customer, basically? So what support functions are necessary? That's delivery service. And how are you going to manage the functions of the government? All of that for identifying. That's big picture. All right, then you can do mission types of information, and then you can basically break this down to per department: intelligence operations, disaster management, internal affairs and commerce, environmental management, transportation, education, etc., etc., etc. Right. Service delivery support. What are you doing? What service are you providing? Controls and oversight, regulatory development, planning and budgeting, risk management, revenue collection, public affairs, legislative, general government. For here, it's a good idea to understand basically the service level that you're providing. What are you doing? And for the FITSI information, I would actually even know the numbers that are associated with that. Because again, it's just more detail for FITSI. Government resource management information. Okay.
So, question.
Go ahead, please.
This material that we're covering, is it the same material that?
It's based off of the same things, but what? So you have basically the big picture in the process, that's CAP. Now, let's tie that to the role and responsibility. Now, if you actually were to go do this, you would need to know how to do that, and that's where FITSI comes in. So if you have actually done it, you'd be familiar with a lot of the documentations, the numbers, what is, auditing, AU.3, for example.
Okay.
So it's in depth.
So you can study this in depth for the next.
Yeah, you're going to take this and just go one more level of in depth, and then you're basically right at FITSE level.
Okay.
Which I actually appreciate that. So if you're really just studying for the FITSE exam, by the time you get up through all of that detail, you should have no problem with CAP. Because it's specifically tying into the roles and responsibilities, which means you really should know how to do this. So you'll know things like these processes, what actions are you taking and who are you doing it with. That's pretty defined. So good questions for FITSE would be, you are in, let's say, you are in security categorization, you are performing the activity of output that can be used as the input in the next election, blah, 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 blah. Who would you be doing this? Which one of the following roles would not be involved with that? Right? That would be a very, very good FITSE question.
This is not target, but how popular or common is the FITSE certification, and or how recognized is it? It's not a term I'm familiar with.
It's growing quickly.
Yeah, I've heard of CAP and CISSP, and then it's from our ISOs, but FITSE is not one I had heard before this class.
You know, anytime there's a limited field, in my opinion, it makes you more valuable, because, you know, it's 1 in 100 versus 1 in 100 million. Which one's more valuable, right? So, you know, like when I had my CISSP, I was like the only one that had a CISSP, other than one other guy that I knew, and this was before 9/11. All of a sudden 9/11 happened, and bam, the industry changed overnight, and they were like, we need to get some young talent in here to figure out what's going on. I was one of the few people that actually had a CISP, and literally overnight I doubled my salary.
Well, CISSP, you have to be in the security field for what, 3 years when you get that far?
Well, what I used at the time was all of my security experience. Again, there was no security positions. They were mostly held by people who were waiting to retire, and they were very much old. They were much older and very established in their positions. And so when they said, you know, hey, we need to come up with 200,000 more people, that criteria for selection wasn't nearly as rigorous as probably I would imagine it would be today. Now that people are flooding to that, and they're not going to put up the gate and say, let's have a stringent filtering process. But what I used from my experience was all of, I was lucky enough to be, I had a couple certifications, but the guys that I worked with were very security conscious, and they would basically hack your system if you left your computer unlocked, you'd have to fix it. So I kind of grew up in my career with a very strong security foundation. So CISSP really wasn't necessarily that hard, because again, you have to reformat your computer a bunch of time to learn your lessons quick. So while I wasn't directly employed, I had worked on things like developing curriculum, and I was able to substitute some of that experience. And when I submitted my application and listed all, they just acknowledged it.
I guess my statement was a question.
Yes, you do have to have, certain level of experience.
Okay, it has to be specialized in the security field? Or
Yep.
can you use your overall
Alright,
IT
so
experience?
what I've seen people do, like if you weren't, if your title is not, Leo the security officer, but you're Leo the network administrator, and you're also performing security related functions, even sometimes as easy as resetting passwords, you can leverage that experience.
Okay.
But you're gonna have to get a manager to basically acknowledge that yes, you know what you're doing. So I can't
Or you can use your
lie.
military documentation.
Yeah.
Like you could have been an MP, that's security.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But you may have never touched a computer in that, in that
Right.
process. So basically, there's a validation process. Somebody's got to give you a stamp of approval.
Okay.
And I had no problem finding people to, even when I was back then, I had no problem getting someone to vouch that, hey, this kid knows what he's doing. And that, that led to bigger and better positions. So I literally went from, a regular IT admin to using my CISSP, an interim CISSP, to get a job in the State Department, and then using that to work on bigger, better projects that were security and clearance related, And then I leverage that with the sponsorship. Now I actually have the certification, and then that led to the operational security officer at Department of Labor. So there's a little flexibility in that process, but that, and you fast forward. What if they would have denied me, right? Let's say that they would have denied me, then the industry would have lost in a sense, because I've taught 170 classes and I've produced really, really good security CISSPs rather than just people that have bookmarked it on their own. So I'd like to think that I've given back to the industry in a very positive way. So, which is ultimately, what we want to do. There's a couple hundred. There's definitely a couple hundred.
Those are the FIPSI people?
Yeah, these are the FIPSI. Jim Wiggins, he is the basically the director. This is his contribution basically to the industry. He saw the need of, we don't need more certifications. What we need is people that actually know what they're doing with the certifications they have.
Right.
So he took some of like the CISSP, the CAP, those concepts, and basically tied it to the roles and responsibility. Poof, now you have FIPSI. So something you really want to think about. Yeah, I mean, there's just hundreds of them here. I should be here somewhere. All right. Alright, so FIPS 189, we pretty much did this. We made about a FISMA security categories based on potential impact, so we got that piece of it. FISMA, remember the FISMA piece is going to be the IAC triad, and then FIPS 199 basically is your impact statement to the category. The very highest level. Impact levels, again, it's going to differ slightly per organization or asset or maybe even individually oriented. But low, again, limited adverse effect to severe and catastrophic effect, basically loss of life or mission capability if something goes down. Which is not so bad, right? Like you could have a database somewhere in a top secret mission critical environment, but if that database goes down, no big deal, right? So, versus you may not have a top secret environment, but you could have something high. If that database goes down, people are dying. So you can have extreme. So impact is generic in its sense. So these are 50,000 foot view ratings, but you might have to dig into really the purpose of that system, who connects to it, and things like that. So the quick check here for me is pull the plug and see what happens. Now you can't always do that in a production environment, but that's a good question to ask me. If I pull the plug on this machine right now, when you're interviewing people, you can say, what would happen? Would you say that it would have, you might not be able to use the purpose of the machine as minor damage, loss, or harm, or is basically somebody going to die as a result? And then you survey people on that.
I think some of our, I don't know about all, but I think some of our law enforcement systems are rated high, not because it will result in loss of life, but it could, because if you can't,
It's the potential.
who's coming across the border, that puts the officers.
Yes,
at
it's
risk.
definitely the potential.
So that's like mission capability.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's a lot going on here. Never mind, she's there. Right. So know those. All right, and then I have the details listed here. Potential impacts moderate if the loss might, and then I have a little bit more detail. Significant damage, organizational assets, result in significant financial loss, significant harm, and again high, severe, catastrophic, major damage, major financial loss. So watch the difference in the words here. Result in major financial loss. Result in significant financial loss. And then if we go back to the other one, minor financial loss. See how the words play? You have to pick up on those words because that will give you the tip-off for what the impact rating is. The words change very slightly between the impact levels. And here's a good example of this. This is basically a grid of security objective, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, cross-reference with low, moderate, or high, and that's your matrix.
I have a question.
Sure.
Okay, do we get this also in electronic form?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Cause if you want my glasses on. You don't have that problem yet, but
I'm getting closer, my friend. Yeah, no problem.
I got a magnifying glass I put on top of things.
I got one on first.
So we saw the process, if you will, of the categorization right from the document. Identifying information types, what are we doing? I pulled some of this verbiage out: mission-based information, management or support information, the legislative information, and anything else that you would have. You can look at it in terms of business areas in itself. So you have the service for citizens and the modes of delivery. So why are you doing it? Service for the citizen. What are you doing? Some sort of delivery of a product, basically. It's always products or service. All right. Before it gets too late, let's go ahead and let's take our first break for the day.